how you associate certain cars with certain brands? Think big estate cars and Volvo, sports cars and Porsche, large limos and Mercedes-Benz. Well, what is it that you think about when you think of BMW? Now, one look at the contemporary model range and you might think SUVs, maybe even an EV, but actually no. It's small sports saloon, the cars that they've been building the best since the 1960s. And it's something that this new M2 embodies better than anything in ages. Now, I know I might be getting a bit ahead of myself, we're still at the beginning of the review, but this thing is freaking awesome. To appreciate the M2, you have to really understand the value of sharing, because in this case, BMW's done it right. It shares its engine, its gearbox, and basic chassis with the current M3, which is why the keratin-enhanced bodywork only just covers it. Now, I know that this car's design has generated quite a lot of hate, but trust me, in the flesh, it looks fantastic. Some people don't like these grills and how they don't have frames, and think that these square intakes are also a little bit weird, but in the flesh, they dip and dive to create some really fun and aggressive shapes. Now, the front arches are pumped to the point of bursting, and those sills are really square and blocky and give it a real DTM car vibe, which is totally awesome. These rear haunches are also so aggressive, and the same can be said for the rear bumper and those fat exhaust pipes as well. But my favourite part of the M2's design are all the awkward bits. Now, the front end of the M2 is so different to a standard 2 Series coupe that BMW's obviously had a lot of trouble getting everything to line up. That's why there are all these little weird overhangs and overlaps everywhere, and the surface between the bonnet and the bumper are actually completely different. Now, that might sound like a disadvantage, but it's a sort of I don't give a damn attitude that really makes this car appealing. It's fantastic.
Now, it's worth remembering that the M2 chassis might be shared with other 2 Series coupes, but the overall body isn't, because aside from the doors, the boot lid and the bonnet, there's not a single panel you'll find on your run-of-the-mill 220i. Of course, all this bulging bodywork means nothing if the M2's not packing, but trust me, it is.
Under that oddly fitted bonnet is BMW M's S58 straight-six engine. That's a 3-litre twin-turbocharged petrol unit. Those who aren't really into their BMW engine lingo, the S bit of that S58 denotes that this is BMW M's own engine. It's not the full ground-up sort of job that they used to be, but it is heavily redeveloped, which means that it's got really trick bits like 3D printed elements in the headers and a closed deck construction to handle loads of grunt. I've been lucky enough to actually spend loads of time with this engine before, and when it first came out in the original X3M, it was actually kind of rubbish. The response wasn't very good, it didn't sound like much, and it sort of built boost in a really linear but not very sporty manner. But things really started to change when BMW brought out this engine in the G80 M3. Everything was so much more aggressive and sharp. It seemed to have this really lovely linear build to the redline, and the gearbox was so much better as well. But in early 2021, BMW actually quietly introduced this little software update that gave it even more aggression and made the gearbox particularly much more aggressive to shifts. That same change has actually been applied to the M2 with great results. Now, this engine's latest and most aggressive application is actually in the new M4 CSL and M3 CS, where it's pushing out a massive 542 brake horsepower. In those cars, it's in full fire spitting and bunny hopping gear change modes, but in the M2, it's just as spectacular. Of course, being BMW M's baby model, there have been some concessions in terms of power, because the M2 produces 453 brake horsepower, which is actually the least amount of power that this S58 has produced so far in any of its models.
Torque has also been thinned down to 550 Newton meters, but this has been done for a very specific reason, because as well as the 8-speed automatic that we've got here, BMW is also offering a 6-speed manual. Confession time though, I've not actually driven the manual yet, but according to plenty of my colleagues, the 6-speed's probably more of a novelty than an essential element of the M2's driving experience. You see, BMW's gearboxes have never been particularly great, and with 2 less gears to play with, plus that engine's lack of torque, the longer gear ratios will almost certainly impact the M2's performance.
The 8-speed auto though is superb. It mooches around at low speeds really well, and it's much more everyday usable than the old dual clutch. Now, it does have its quirks. It loves to hold low gears at low speeds a little too long, and for some reason, and this is probably to do with BMW's sort of positioning of the M2, it doesn't do the full whip crack fast change in its sportiest modes, but it's still a fantastic little ally to the engine. So big thumbs up for the engine and gearbox then. But the M2 is all about the chassis. And now, fans of the old car, please put your feelings to one side, because yes, I know this is a much heavier car than the old one, but all of the components are so beefy that it feels no heavier than the old one. It's so agile. If I had one wish, it would probably concern the steering. Now it's very good, but it just lacks that precision found in the M3 comp and also the M4 CSL. Combined with the short wheelbase, it actually makes it a little bit snappy and hard to drive at that really awesome spot just above the limit of grip.
Thing is though, all of this is really nitpicking because at 62 grand, the M2 looks, feels and smells like a complete bargain. I mean, this is all the same hardware that BMW charges double for in other models. And yes, it might not have the carbon fiber bits or the ultimate track focus chassis setup, but it doesn't matter because that's not what the M2 is here to do. Its job is to bring BMW M's best bits together in a cheaper package, which doesn't only appeal to a different set of buyers, but also gives it a more attractive and carefree nature. It's this that really sells the M2 for me, because these sorts of cars should have a sense of humour. I mean, I'm just so bored of performance cars that take themselves too seriously.
So I know that some of you aren't going to like this as much as the old one, and that's fine, you do you, hun. But for me, this thing is just awesome, and I'm really not looking forward to having to give the keys back at the end of this shoot.